People think the hardest thing in life is failure, but really, the hardest thing is success. Because once you start shining, people show up, and not because they love you, not because they care about you, but because they want something from you. Oprah figured this out early. She realized that if she tried to make everyone like her, she'd never have peace, and peace, for her, was worth more than popularity. See, we live in a culture where popularity is treated like currency. More likes, more followers, more people clapping for you. But if the applause is hollow, if the people cheering don't care whether you rise or fall, what does it really mean? Oprah could have spent her life bending over backwards, pleasing everyone, keeping people close just to feel accepted. But she didn't. She decided her peace of mind was worth more than being liked by the crowd. And that's not an easy choice, because popularity looks good on the outside. It feeds your ego. It makes you feel important. But it also chains you. You end up living for their approval, for their validation, for their acceptance. And when you do that, you stop living for yourself. Oprah chose differently. She made a conscious decision to protect her spirit instead of selling it for applause. That's why she's where she is. Not because she made everyone happy, but because she refused to. Think about it. How many people do you know who exhaust themselves trying to be liked? They smile when they don't feel like smiling. They say yes when they mean no. They stay quiet when they should speak up. All because they're terrified of losing approval. Oprah didn't play that game. She discovered that peace is found when you stop negotiating your values just to fit into rooms you don't belong in. That doesn't mean she was cold or unkind or arrogant. No, she was gracious, but she was also firm. She wasn't going to let just anyone into her inner world, because she knew that every friend you allow close has the power to shape you, to drain you, to distract you. And when you're called to something bigger, you don't have the luxury of letting everyone's hands touch the steering wheel of your life. She understood something most people miss. Popularity is temporary. The crowd that cheers for you today will boo you tomorrow if it benefits them. Peace is permanent because it comes from within, and she would rather walk alone in peace than be surrounded by people who only clapped when it served them. Now, you may not be Oprah. You may not have a global platform or $1 billion business, but you know what? You've got the same decision in front of you. Do you want peace or do you want popularity? Do you want to live a life that's steady, grounded, unshaken, or a life that depends on who texts you back, who invites you out, who praises you when you do something right? The truth is, when you choose peace over popularity, you lose people. But you also lose anxiety, you lose drama, you lose the constant pressure of performing for others, and what you gain is freedom, freedom to be yourself, freedom to make choices without worrying about who approves, freedom to stop auditioning for friendships that don't deserve you. The thing about success that nobody really warns you about is the noise. The more you climb, the louder it gets. Everybody suddenly has an opinion. Everybody suddenly wants a piece of you, and if you're not careful, you'll spend more time managing the noise than managing your own life. Oprah knew this. She understood that her greatest resource wasn't money, it wasn't time, it wasn't even opportunity. It was energy. And the reason she could accomplish what she did was because she guarded that energy like it was gold. Most people don't think of energy as something to protect. They think of it as endless, something they can just give away without consequence. But every conversation, every meeting, every friendship you maintain out of obligation, it costs you something. It costs focus, it costs peace, it costs clarity. Oprah didn't let people drain her without noticing the bill. She had to decide, does this person refill me or do they empty me? Does this environment feed me or does it steal from me? And when she realized something wasn't worth her energy, she stepped away, even if it meant being misunderstood. That's hard to do because we're taught to say yes. We're taught to keep showing up, to keep giving, to keep proving ourselves. But if you say yes to everything, You eventually say no to yourself. Oprah learned to flip that. She started saying yes to herself first and letting her boundaries do the talking. Not everyone liked it, but not everyone was supposed to. You see, success is a magnet. It attracts genuine supporters, but it also attracts opportunists. People who only call when they need something, people who disappear the second you can't benefit them. And here's the truth. If you don't learn how to guard your energy, you'll end up giving your best to people who deserve your least. Oprah wasn't willing to live that way. She knew she couldn't show up fully for her calling if she was always running on empty. What I love about this is that she didn't apologize for it. She didn't over-explain. She didn't justify. She didn't soften it so people wouldn't take offense. She simply chose to honor herself enough to protect her energy. And that's a lesson for all of us, because protecting your energy isn't selfish. It's survival. It's the only way you'll have anything left to give to the people and the purpose that really matter. Think about how different your life would look if you guarded your energy the way you guard your money, if you stopped handing it out to people who only take and never give back, if you stopped letting environments drain you just because you don't want to seem rude. Imagine how much more focused you'd be, how much calmer you'd feel, how much stronger you'd stand. That's what Oprah did. She didn't wait for people to respect her boundaries. She enforced them herself. And in doing so, she created space for clarity, creativity, and the kind of growth that requires silence more than applause. At the end of the day, Oprah wasn't trying to cut people out just to be cold or distant. She was protecting the core of who she was, so she could keep showing up as the best version of herself. And maybe that's why she never needed a crowd of friends to feel fulfilled, because her energy was too valuable to be scattered. And if you really want to live at peace, if you really want to build something lasting, you've got to start guarding your energy the same way. Because if you don't, someone else will spend it for you. It's easy to get caught up in the numbers. How many friends do you have? How many people showed up to your birthday? How many followers are watching your life online? We're trained to believe that the bigger the circle, the better we're doing. But Oprah saw right through that illusion. She knew from experience that 10 people in your life who don't really care about you are worth less than one who does. That's why she didn't chase crowds. She valued depth over numbers. See, most people collect friends the way others collect trophies, just to prove they have them. But when life gets hard, when the cameras turn off, when the noise quiets down, trophies don't talk back. Numbers don't hug you. Crowds don't show up at 2 in the morning when you're breaking down. Oprah chose to put her energy into the rare people who could handle silence, honesty, and truth, not just the spotlight. And that wasn't easy for her, because in her world, everyone wanted access. Everyone wanted to be around her. But she could see the difference between people who wanted Oprah the person and people who wanted Oprah the opportunity. And she refused to confuse the two. That's wisdom most of us still struggle to learn. We hand out trust to people who haven't earned it. We open up to people who haven't proven themselves. And then we're surprised when they can't carry the weight of our heart. Oprah wasn't surprised because she stopped expecting depth from shallow wells. What she did instead was build a small, steady circle. She focused on quality over quantity. She didn't need someone to go to lunch with every day. She needed someone who would tell her the truth when she didn't want to hear it. Someone who didn't care about her fame, who wasn't impressed by her money, who loved her for her. And those people are rare. They don't show up in dozens, they show up in ones and twos. That's why her circle looked empty to outsiders, but full to her. There's a freedom in that kind of life. Because when you stop measuring your worth by how many people are around you, you can start measuring it by how authentic the relationships are. And when you have depth, you don't need numbers to fill the silence. You can sit with someone for hours without saying much and still feel understood. You can go through seasons without talking every day and still feel connected. Oprah treasured that. She didn't waste her time with surface, level friendships that couldn't weather storms. This is where most of us get it wrong. We keep people around just so we don't feel alone, even if those people make us lonelier. We entertain relationships that are convenient, not meaningful. And then we wonder why we feel drained, why we feel unseen, why we feel like we're giving so much but getting nothing back. Oprah wasn't afraid to cut through that. She wasn't scared of the loneliness that comes with choosing depth. Because she knew that real connection might take longer to find, but when you find it, it makes every empty room worth it. At the end of the day, she didn't have many friends, but she had the right ones. And that's what mattered, because 100 people who pretend to care can't compare to one who really does. Most people are terrified of being alone. They'll fill their schedules, fill their phones, fill their lives with noise just so they don't have to face silence. But Oprah was different. She didn't just tolerate solitude, she embraced it. She made being alone her strength, and that's one of the reasons she grew into the kind of woman who didn't need a crowd to validate her. Think about it, when you're always surrounded by people, you're always distracted. You don't get the chance to hear your own thoughts. You don't get the space to figure out what you really feel, what you really want, or what you really believe. Oprah didn't run from those moments. She leaned into them. Her solitude became her classroom. That's where she processed pain. That's where she sharpened her vision. That's where she recharged her soul so she could keep pouring into the world. And here's the truth. Solitude is not the same as loneliness. Loneliness is an emptiness that comes from feeling unseen or unloved. Solitude is the intentional choice to step away from the crowd so you can see yourself more clearly. Oprah understood that distinction. She wasn't isolated, she was invested. Every time she chose time alone, she was investing in her growth, her peace, her clarity. She used those moments to ground herself so that when she did step back into the noise, she knew who she was. Most of us run from solitude because we don't like what we'll find in it. We're afraid of the thoughts that come up when there's no distraction. We're afraid of facing ourselves. But Oprah knew that the only way to lead others was to lead herself first, and that required stillness. She used that stillness to think deeply, to dream boldly, and to connect with something bigger than her fame or success. That's why her influence had weight. It wasn't built in chaos, it was built in quiet. And maybe that's something you need to hear. Maybe the reason you feel burned out, maybe the reason you feel disconnected, maybe the reason you feel stuck, is because you haven't given yourself permission to step away. You keep thinking solitude will make you weaker, when really it's what makes you stronger. Oprah didn't come back from those quiet moments empty. She came back filled. Filled with direction, filled with resilience, filled with the confidence that can only come when you stop needing other people's voices to drown out your own. The beauty of solitude is that it strips away the unnecessary. It helps you see who's really in your corner and who's just there for convenience. When you spend enough time with yourself, you stop tolerating what doesn't align with your peace. That's exactly what Oprah did. Her strength came not from being surrounded, but from being centered. She learned how to sit with herself long enough to not settle for less than she deserved. And here's the thing, you can do the same. You don't need to be a billionaire or a global icon to benefit from solitude. You just need to stop being afraid of your own company. You need to stop believing the lie that being alone makes you less valuable. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is turn down the volume of the world long enough to hear yourself again. One of the most dangerous traps people fall into is the approval game. It looks harmless at first. You do something, people clap, and it feels good. But soon you're not doing it because you believe in it. You're doing it because you need their applause. And once that happens, you're no longer in control of your life. Oprah understood that trap. She refused to let her worth be tied to who clapped the loudest or who criticized the harshest. She knew that if she spent her life chasing approval, she'd never have the freedom to live with purpose. When you think about it, Approval is like a moving target. One day people love you, the next day they're tearing you apart. One audience will cheer you on, another will boo you for the exact same thing. If you're living for their validation, you'll spend your whole life exhausted, chasing something you'll never catch. Oprah didn't want that kind of life. She wanted to stand for something bigger than popularity. She wanted to be rooted in truth, not tossed around by public opinion. That meant being okay with being misunderstood. It meant being criticized for decisions people didn't agree with. It meant being talked about in ways that weren't fair. But here's the difference. She didn't let those voices steer her. She didn't hand over the wheel of her life just because the crowd was shouting directions. She knew who she was, and that was enough. Think about how freeing that is. Most people waste years trying to get everyone to like them, to agree with them, to accept them, and what do they end up with? Stress, anxiety, a version of themselves that doesn't even feel authentic, because you can't please everyone. It's impossible. Oprah didn't waste her time trying. She wasn't reckless. She wasn't arrogant. She just understood that if you stand for everything, you stand for nothing. And if you bend every time someone disapproves, you'll never build anything strong enough to last. It takes courage to walk away from the approval game, because approval feels good. It's addictive, and when you stop chasing it, you'll notice people pull back. They'll call you selfish. They'll say you've changed. They'll label you difficult. But what they're really saying is, you're no longer doing what benefits me. Oprah didn't let those accusations weaken her. She knew that if living true to herself cost her some people's approval, it was a price worth paying. And here's the part we forget. Approval doesn't equal love. People can approve of you today and still leave you tomorrow. But when you stop depending on it, when you let go of the need to be validated by everyone else, you finally step into freedom. Freedom to make mistakes without shame. Freedom to speak truth without fear. Freedom to create, to dream, to live, without carrying the heavy weight of constant performance. That's why Oprah's influence is so powerful, because it wasn't built on making everyone happy. It was built on the strength of knowing who she was, even when people didn't agree. She refused to play the game most of us spend our lives stuck in. And because of that, she didn't just survive the noise. She rose above it. We've been taught, since we were kids, that friendship means numbers. That if you've got a lot of people around you, you must be loved. But Oprah redefined that word completely. She didn't see friendship as a crowd of people you hang out with. She saw it as the handful of people who truly stand with you. And because of that, she was never afraid of saying she didn't have many friends. To her, friendship wasn't measured in birthdays remembered, texts sent, or lunches scheduled. It was measured in loyalty, in honesty, in the kind of presence that doesn't disappear when the lights go out. The beauty of her life is that she didn't let culture's definition of friendship pressure her into entertaining relationships that didn't serve her soul. She wasn't interested in surface-level connections that were all smiles in public and silent in private. She looked for the kind of people who would tell her the truth, even if it hurt. The kind of people who saw Oprah the human being, not Oprah the empire. And because those people are rare, her circle stayed small. Here's what that teaches us. You don't need a dozen people to validate you. You need one or two who genuinely see you, because most of the time we confuse company with connection. We surround ourselves with bodies just so we don't feel alone, but our hearts are still empty. Oprah flipped that script. She taught us that it's better to walk alone with integrity than to walk with a group that doesn't really care about you. And that perspective is powerful, because when you stop needing a big circle, you free yourself from a lot of disappointment. You stop expecting depth from people who can't give it. You stop trying to force relationships to be more than they are. And you start appreciating the rare souls who can meet you where you really are. Oprah didn't hide behind the idea of being too busy for friends. She simply redefined the word so that it meant something deeper. That's why, when she said she had no friends, it wasn't a confession of lack. It was a declaration of strength. She didn't need the illusion of friendship to feel secure. She had herself, she had her peace, and she had the few trusted people who actually mattered. That was enough, and that's the shift we need to make in our own lives. To stop being ashamed if our circle is small, to stop feeling like something's wrong with us if we don't have a list of people to call on Friday night. Because friendship isn't about filling space, it's about filling your soul. The truth is, the higher you go in life, the smaller your circle becomes. Not because you're unlovable, not because you're difficult, but because very few people are capable of walking at that level with you. Oprah understood that. She wasn't bitter about it, she wasn't insecure about it, she accepted it, and in that acceptance she found freedom. So maybe the next time you feel like you don't have enough friends, you should remember Oprah. Because the goal was never to have many, the goal was always to have meaningful.